Of all the various streams one might glean information regarding the magic, mystery and divinities of the Welsh landscape, the 4 branches of the Mabinogi are likely the most well known. The stories that comprise the 4 branches have been translated into English and many other languages by today, and you can easily pick up a copy from your local bookseller. Due to this accessibility and the fact the stories are deeply enigmatic and gripping, the 4 branches have inspired lovers of mythology, fantasy fiction authors, poets, artists, and even modern day streams of paganism and witchcraft for years upon years. What we refer to as the 4 branches of the Mabinogi are a collection of Welsh prose tales which were preserved in medieval manuscripts. It has long been debated how old exactly the manuscripts themselves are. Scholars of the past, such as Sir Ivor Williams, were of the opinion that the written versions of the stories as we know them today were written down during the 11th century. More recent scholarship, however, prefers to date them to a later time in the medieval period. The stories themselves, however, hold echoes of an older tradition of oral storytelling. What this means is that the written versions of the stories are not necessarily the oldest versions. In fact, it is believed that the stories as they are recorded in medieval manuscripts, such as the Red Book of Hergest and the White Book of Rhydderch, are essentially copies of copies. We can never know for certain how old exactly the stories themselves are, nor how much they might have changed over time before eventually being preserved onto ink and paper. However, it is clear that during the medieval period, a tumultuous period for the Welsh who were fighting to preserve their heritage and culture amidst constant invasions and attacks, nobles who had the resources to do so clearly viewed these stories as worthy of being remembered. Long before the words were put to paper, however, it is likely that these stories were living, breathing things, not only told but performed by a learned Cyfarwyddiaid, a traditional storyteller, around campfires, in the courts of castles, and at important community events. Themes, characters and ideas woven throughout the 4 branches are today easily recognizable to many with an interest in Celtic mythology. It is in this tradition of storytelling that we find the stories of Rhiannon, Branwen, Bran the Blessed, Hranrod, Chwchoeches, Gwydion and many other characters who are now revered across the world as gods by modern day polytheists, pagans and witches. I really hope I pronounced those right. But why do we call them the 4 branches? In Welsh, the stories are referred to as Pedair Cainc ein Mabinogi, literally the 4 branches of the Mabinogi. Naming the stories as branches leads us to envision them in our minds as a body of lore connected to one mighty tree, with each story acting as a branch jutting out from the main tree trunk. This is a beautiful, poetic and useful visualization of the stories. They grow, twisted and gnarled, winding around one another, branching off into smaller twigs that lead down strange yet entertaining tangents. The idea of the stories being referred to as branches comes from the manuscripts within which they are preserved. At the end of certain story cycles, the text reads, and thus ends this branch of the Mabinogi. Here's a quick clip from our podcast with Mara speaking this beautifully for you to hear the Welsh version.
They end with the term ac felly terfyna'r gainc hon o'r Mabinogi, which translates to, and thus ends this branch of the Mabinogi.
This indicates to us that the primary storyline or cycle we were previously following has come to an end, and now we are embarking on a new venture. However, it must be remembered that the stories themselves are intimately connected with one another as well, made abundantly clear by reoccurring characters, storylines which act as the direct consequences of events which unfolded in previous branches, references to certain events and ideas mentioned earlier, and so on. This system gives the 4 branches a sense of seriality and continuation. We are being immersed in a world and a story which might at times feel disjointed and confusing. yet we are constantly reminded that each story, at its core, connects to the same root, the same tree. Move over Marvel's cinematic universe, the Mabinogi did it first. The stories which make up the 4 branches are Hwrish Pendifig Dyfed, Branwen Fyrch Lia, Manawridan Chapria, Mafav Mafomve. And whilst these stories are saturated with concepts of magic, otherworldly contact, shape-shifting giants, magical cauldrons, and seemingly divine beings, they are, at their heart, also grounded stories about family, shame, and reparation, morality, and leadership. It is this mixture of the fantastical and the mundane which we believe make the stories so deeply relatable, enthralling, and entertaining. Despite having been put to pen and paper in the medieval period, these stories could easily rival the likes of Tolkien's stories or Game of Thrones today. And in fact, these popular pieces of fantasy literature draw a lot of inspiration from the 4 branches of the Mabinogi. Want to learn more about both the Mabinogi and Welsh mythology? Then we have the perfect books for you, Pantheon the Welsh and Mabinogi by Mara Starling, who also provided the words for this video. Pantheon the Welsh, journey through history and myth, language and charm to learn about the deities of Wales. And Pagan Portals Mabinogi, explore the magic of Welsh mythology and how to incorporate the wisdom of these enigmatic tales into the very fabric of your magical and spiritual practices. Both are available from Moonbooks Publishing. Thank you so much for watching. A special thank you as always to our members. You too can become a member and gain early access to videos just like this one. Subscribe for weekly videos, ring the bell for notifications, and we will see you next time. Please forgive my pronunciation.